Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Well, welcome everyone back to the Blue Dot podcast. We're so excited that you tuned in to listen. I'm Natalie MacDonald, and I'm happy to report that my co-host Brian Koehl is back with us from his travels. Hey, Brian, glad to have you back.
Hey, Natalie, hello. Yes, I am happy to be back with you on the Blue Dot pod. I wanted to give a shout out to Danielle Bell for sitting in for me on the last episode. I mean, she did such a great job. I was wondering if I would still have a job when I return. So thank you, Danielle.
You can't get out of it that easy. You still have a job here.
Okay. So Natalie, what's going on that we're going to explore in today's podcast?
Well, we're just rolling off of Memorial Day, which gave us a time to reflect and honor American soldiers and military personnel who died in service to our country and for our freedom. So I did just want to acknowledge all of our veterans and their families, especially those who sacrificed everything. And I don't come from a military family, and I've never served. How about you, Brian? Did you serve or have a military family?
Well, actually, other than a couple of uncles who I believe served in World War II, I think one was actually a bomber pilot. My family has not been involved in a lot of military service. And, when somebody would ask me, I used to say I was fortunate to not have been required to serve. But really, as I've gotten older and grown to appreciate that, our American story really is exceptional. And that exceptionality is in large part due to the many sacrifices of our servicemen and women and their families, as well as to witness how strong, proud, and closely knit the military community is. I think I would now say I have been unfortunate to have never served. I just so much appreciate and revere our service members, veterans, and their families for their sacrifice and service to the country and really to the world. They are a national treasure that the rest of us need to respect, protect, and care for.
Well, that's a really beautiful perspective. My father actually tried to get into every branch that he could, but he was denied. He had some health problems. But his father, my grandfather, did fight in World War II. And so I made sure to go by and pay my respects to him as I do every year. And just kind of as a side note, I've noticed that every year that I do go to his grave, or there's always a couple pennies on his tombstone. And I don't know who does it. My father says it's not him, but I love my geeky facts. So I looked into what these pennies meant, and I've come to learn that it's actually a tradition that dates back to the Vietnam era. And in fact, I learned that different coins mean different things. So for instance, those pennies that someone left for my grandfather is just a way for people to show their respect. If a nickel's left behind, that means the person who visited actually trained with that person in boot camp. If it was a dime, they served together at some point in their careers. And then a quarter is left by someone who was present when that service member died. So I thought that was just a really interesting tradition that I never knew about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never heard about the coins at grave sites and their significance. We'll have to ask our guest about this, as later on in the pod, we'll be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, who served for over 20 years in the United States military. Amy is going to talk with us today about what she's been up to since her congressional campaigns and talk a little bit about what's happening to our veterans under the Trump-Hegseth administration and how this is all affecting those military personnel stationed here in Kentucky at Fort Campbell and Fort Knox.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. But before we get to Amy, let's take a look at some of those kitchen table topics that people have been discussing since our last podcast. And I think the most glaring one is the big BS bill that the House just passed. Have you seen the CBO estimates on this thing?
Yeah, or as the Democrats have labeled it, the one big ugly bill.
That's right.
And ugly and cruel and irresponsible it is. The Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, as you mentioned, is the independent, nonpartisan federal agency that analyzes Congress's budget programs and provides back to them the true financial impact of, the budgets and other financial legislation. And yes, not only will Big Ugly raise the debt an estimated $3.8 trillion, it will also cut around $700 billion from Medicaid, forcing over 7 million people to lose their coverage. Another $300 billion will be pulled from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, another federal program that is critical to the health and well-being of lower-income Americans. What then, you ask, is driving the nearly $4 trillion that will be added to the national debt? Tax cuts, of course. The bill is essentially a mechanism to maintain Trump's 2017 tax cuts that disproportionately go to the wealthiest Americans. Predictably, the bill mostly benefits the rich and hurts lower-income households, which make up most of rural America. The GOP is showing once more that its number one priority is Trump's billionaire backers, not working families. While Kentucky families struggle with rising costs, Republicans want to hand even more tax breaks and benefits to the wealthy few.
Yeah, and speaking directly about Kentucky, there was a report that was published by the Kaiser Family Foundation that indicated that the state of Kentucky, our great state of Kentucky, is likely to face some of the most dramatic impacts of these changes. So in Kentucky, more than 1.4 million people depend on Medicaid, and it is estimated that this bill will disqualify up to 24% of those recipients. Only 4 states, North Dakota, Montana, Virginia, and Washington, are projected to see higher percentages of residents disqualified from Medicaid. And if you look at it just in terms of dollar amounts, Kentucky ranks second highest. That's the second highest in the amount of per capita Medicaid spending reduction that will take place under this bill. And that's second only to Louisiana, an estimated per capita loss of Medicaid funding across the country.
Wow. And that's just the Medicaid impact of the bill. Over 500,000 families in Kentucky rely on SNAP benefits, which stands to lose, as we mentioned, $300 billion in funding. Think, for instance, financial assistance to working families to afford more and healthier groceries, or, really importantly, school lunches for kids. That is what's going to be wiped out. SNAP benefits are not handouts, they're lifelines for working families. Medicaid and SNAP are vital programs that millions of Americans rely on for quality, affordable health care and to put food on the table. For Kentucky families in our rural communities, Medicaid expansion has been crucial, covering everything from addiction treatment to prenatal care. The GOP bill could result in nearly 14 million Americans total going uninsured. In Kentucky, reduced Medicare payments from the federal government could mean rural hospitals closing their doors, forcing families to travel significant distances for basic care. Kentucky's already lost too many rural hospitals.
Yeah, and you know what's really sad when you talk about the addiction treatment and all of the good things that we've seen happen in Kentucky, where we've seen addiction rates dramatically decrease, where we've seen uninsured rates dramatically decrease under Governor Beshear's leadership, it's all going to be potentially reversed. And so just showing once again, the Republicans are not fighting for children of this state. They're not fighting for the parents, seniors in nursing homes, or people with disabilities. They're only looking out for that ultra wealthy contingency, while the Democrats continue to hammer home the fight for working families. It's really sad.
And as we mentioned before, the enormous cost of this bill mostly comes from tax cuts. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, or ITEP, took a look and released the data on who benefits the most. And Natalie, do you want to take a guess on who that is?
Let me take a stab in the dark. The richest of the rich.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. Yes, and this should be no surprise. If passed into law, as it currently stands, the poorest fifth of Americans would receive 1% of the bill's net tax cuts. That's the poorest fifth, 1%, while the richest fifth of Americans would receive 68%. So the poorest fifth, 1%, the richest fifth, 68% of the tax cut benefits. However, the richest 5% alone would receive 43% of the net tax cuts in 2026. And to add insult to injury, not only are the rich getting richer, these cuts will cause household resources as a percent of income to decrease 4% every 2 years until 2033 for the low-income brackets and the middle-class earners, and increase 3% every 2 years for the highest wage earners. So the lower income are getting hit right out of the gate and will continue to go down, while the higher income brackets will continue to increase their wealth. And an added fun, ugly bill fact, even foreign investors who own shares in U.S. companies would benefit more than the poorest fifth of Americans. So these are the foreign investors are going to do better through this bill than our own Americans. These foreign investors will enjoy $23 billion in tax cuts in 2026 compared to just $4 billion for the bottom 20% of Americans. I mean, the GOP loves to say it has become the party of the working class, but their actions don't match their words. If Republicans really do care for the working class, they'll grow a spine and join Democrats to protect these critical programs.
So yeah, absolutely. And if they don't, they'll face the consequences in the midterms. And as Leader Hakeem Jeffries said in his address to Congress on the day the bill was passed, he said, when people look back in history, this will be the day the Republicans lost control of the U.S. House of Representatives. And I surely hope that this comes to fruition.
Yeah, we sure do hope that's the case. And we're going to continue to work hard to make that fate a reality. I mean, we believe Kentucky voters will remember who stood with working families and who stood with Trump's billionaire buddies. And I have just a couple final bullet points on the big ugly mess that further illustrate how completely irresponsible and unhelpful this legislation is. For the rich, doubles the estate and gift tax exemption, so it's largely an aid to wealth families. So you can go from $5.5 million in a gift, tax exempt, to $11 million to $11.2 million. And I mean, there's all kinds of environmental impacts to this. They're going to rescind most of Biden administration's clean energy credits and investments. And these have proven to reduce electric bills in many parts of the country through alternative sources of energy. Billions of dollars cut from student loan forgiveness, and Pell Grant programs. But don't worry, we're going to get increased funding for ICE and Trump's deportation efforts. They are talking about banning Medicaid from covering gender-affirming care, eliminate tax registration requirement for gun silencers. I mean, who asked for that?
Right?
So it's defunding some of Planned Parenthood services, diverting $10 billion from funding in public schools towards private school voucher programs, and unfortunately, a lot more, and most of it is bad.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's just really important for people to have the chance to hear exactly what's all involved with this bill, because, there's so much of it is harming the average American. But we also have all of these DOGE cuts and all of these other Trump decisions that have been harming our veterans. And we've been talking about that coming off of Memorial Day. And we have a great guest today to discuss some of these issues with. So let's welcome to the show our guest, Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath. Thanks so much for being here, Amy.
Hey, great to be with you.
In full disclosure, Amy and I went to high school together, so we've known each other for a long time. But for those who don't know you, Amy, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you went from a career in the military to jumping into politics, PACs, and podcasts?
Oh my gosh. And a lot more too. So I grew up here in Northern Kentucky, left home at the age of 18, went into the military via the United States Naval Academy, and became a Marine Corps officer, did 20 years as a Marine Corps officer after graduating from Annapolis. Got a chance to follow my dreams and fly for the Marine Corps, ended up being an F-18 backseater and then front seater, so F-18 pilot. 3 combat tours and many tours around the country and around the world. Got married along the way and had a few kids all while in the military. And then at the end of my career, which I really didn't even know was the end, I was sort of pulled in the direction of getting out because I felt like I could make a difference in doing that, in getting out of the military, getting into politics, jumping into the political arena. I ran for the 6th Congressional District in Kentucky, and then turned around and ran for Senate against Mitch McConnell in 2020. And after that race, of course, both of those, we were not successful in terms of winning the seat, but we were successful in many other ways. In the 2018 cycle, we made that district we put it in play, shall we say, and that maneuvered a lot of money nationwide to the district from the Republican Party. And that means that there are people in Congress today who benefited from us running a really good race. And I'm talking about Alyssa Slotkin and Chrissy Houlihan, Mikey Sherrill, all these great, Jason Crow, all these great people that ran in 2018. And then in 2020, look, we ran a great race there and made Mitch McConnell really work for that seat, which was really important. Also helping other candidates around the country in Georgia, Colorado, win the Senate that year. From then, Natalie, I went, started a bunch of PACs. We could talk about those if you'd like, but it's basically to help other candidates around the country. Pro-democracy PACs, and then one particular that helps women to get started, women who have served the country get started in politics, because I think we need more women who have served the country in many ways to jump into that arena. And I also just started a show called Truth in the Barrel. It's a show with former Republican Representative Denver Riggleman. And we talk politics and national security, and we're having a good time doing that.
So back to some of our, things we'd like to learn, have you as a guest on the pod, and thanks again for being here. Of course, we're seeing DOGE cuts to the military by way of reducing the VA workforce of 83,000 jobs, financial cuts rolling back, and President Joe Biden's investment in the VA to address a lot of long-standing staffing problems, and the Veterans Crisis Line, which receives 60,000 calls a month, Veterans Research, and more. A lot of really good things are now being, potentially rolled back or have been rolled back. Why do you think this isn't getting more attention, especially here in Kentucky, where we have both Fort Knox and Fort Campbell?
Yeah, so to answer your question of why this hasn't been getting as much attention as you'd think, I think it's because the effects haven't completely hit yet. They've hit some, but not a ton just yet. And I'll make the distinction for everybody listening between the military, the active duty military, and the VA. There's the Veterans Affairs. They are completely different parts of our federal government. So there haven't been a ton of cuts to the military. In fact, the Secretary of Defense has actually come out and said that he wants $1 trillion military budget. That's separate. What they are going after, as you mentioned, Brian, is the VA. And this gets to the core of the matter. We send and have sent Americans to war for decades. There is a promise there when you sign your name on the dotted line for Uncle Sam to send you wherever, to do whatever. The promise is that Uncle Sam will take care of you. Three main things that veterans have sort of get for their service. And a lot of people debate whether this is a lot. I actually don't think it's a lot. Number one, you get the GI Bill. If you want to go to education, go to college, guess what? You're not going to Harvard. We're not going to pay for Harvard, but we will pay for a state school. And you can get a higher education on the GI Bill, or you can get a technical college education. So that's number one. Number two, you get health care, not for your family, but for you, for the rest of your life, through the VA healthcare system, which is a very good system. It has issues, but it's good. It's been around a long time. And there are certain things that only the VA does for people who have gone overseas and have served, that have traumatic brain injuries, that have limb injuries, things like that the VA is very good at doing. And the third thing is you get a better home loan. If the interest rate is 5%, guess what? You're going to get like 4.5. You're not guaranteed a job. You're not guaranteed a pension, for your enlistment, but you are guaranteed those things. And what the Republicans are doing right now is attacking one of those things. And that is the VA healthcare system that you mentioned. Right now they're looking at cutting 83,000 jobs along the VA workforce. So what is that? What is that? Those are the people that work in the hospitals, that work in that medical system, that man the veterans suicide hotline. You cannot cut 83,000 jobs and not expect there to be diminished services to veterans. Just impossible. And the other thing that they're going after right now is the federal workforce. So people need to understand that 30% of the federal workforce are prior military, are veterans.
Right.
Why? Because I guess number 4 of the deal that you sort of get as a vet is you used to get priority hiring for some federal jobs. So if you want to go work for the IRS, you want to go work for Social Security Administration, and you're a veteran, you're going to get like priority hiring because the federal government looks at you and says, you've already proven yourself. And so when they go after these federal jobs, you're going after veterans. And if you think about numbers, what DOGE is trying to do right now, what they've stated that they want to do is they want to cut 75% of our federal workforce. Folks, that is 500,000 veterans.
Wow.
If they go through with that, that would be 500,000 veterans. So to go back to your original question, I don't think it's completely hit yet. This is what they're talking about doing. And one of the things we have to do is continue to push back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a staggering amount. And what's interesting is when you think about them cutting back the federal workforce, and you talk about giving priority to veterans, a lot of companies have, as part of their DEI efforts, are to help veterans do that in the private sector as well. So they're also kind of pushing private businesses to stop all of their DEI initiatives, which help veterans as well. So it's like you're getting it kind of like on both ends, which is, it's kind of crazy to think about it that way.
It is, and it's not a good service to veterans at all. The ultimate goal, Brian and Natalie, is to privatize the VA. So this is what they're doing to many agencies. Make them fail. Cut them so much that you make them fail so that the consumer, the people, so the veterans themselves, in this case, will say, the VA is terrible and let's just privatize. Let me be clear. There is no political push right now to privatize from veterans. There's no push right now from veterans to privatize the VA. There is from a very small pocket of mega Republicans. Mm-hmm. Why? Look, I'm cynical, but I've seen a lot, and I can tell you why I think they want to do that. They can make money. Well,
we're cynical too. And that's the first thing that we would say as a response to that. Well, let's change topics to something that's not any better. Slightly change topics. Yeah. One more sip there. You're going to need it. Pete Hegseth is arguably the least qualified person to have ever served as Secretary of Defense. But really, besides the clown show that has followed him around, I'm concerned about, and most of us are concerned about, how this affects our national security. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me start by saying Pete Hegseth is not arguably the least qualified. He is the least qualified. There's no arguing about it. You can look at every single Secretary of Defense prior to him, and there is just a huge gap in terms of qualifications. And just to be clear, the only thing he's ever led is a 15 to 30 man veterans organization that he ran into the ground financially. Right. Okay. So he's not qualified at all, but he's there. And, I get this question a lot about, how is it going to affect our national security? I hope we can get through this time without major problems. I think what he's done so far, and I'll outline some of that, has either been a distraction to defending this country, or it has actually been harmful to defending our country. So what has he done so far? And, he's been Secretary of Defense for, 3 months. And he's fired a bunch of generals, okay? He's going to fire more generals and admirals. And we can talk about that if you want, but that's basically harmful in my mind. These people were there for a reason. You're not, it doesn't mean when you fire generals, it doesn't mean the work goes away. If you're firing them to save money, you're not really saving much money. There's really no reason for that. And I would argue that it actually, and I've worked in the Pentagon, unlike Pete Hegseth, I actually served in the Pentagon for several years. You're actually creating more bureaucracy when you fire those generals, because people are used to having decisions made at a certain level. So when you take away those men and women that make those decisions at those levels, it's not like it just, all those decisions go down to a lower level. Things just kind of get gummed up, and there's no thought process behind that. So
Right.
we all want things to be more efficient, and not to say that the Pentagon isn't a bloated institution, but there's no strategic thought behind it. It's just, well, let's fire the top. Let's go back to World War II. If we want to go back to World War II, the Army Air Corps existed. So are we going to get rid of the Air Force? If we want to go back to World War II, we had 7 5-star generals. So are we going to now promote some? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Second thing he's done is he's reverted all these base names back to Confederates. Okay, that's just stupid.
Yeah.
And then he's kicked out possibly thousands of trans persons who have been honorably serving their country, our country, who are, doctors, nurses, pilots, like, dumb. He's banned a bunch of books from military schools, elementary schools on military bases, all the way up to the service academies. Okay, dumb. He's gotten rid of pictures and websites that talk about Jackie Robinson's service, Tuskegee Airmen, Navajo code talkers, pretty much any woman in the military. He really hates women in the military. Get rid of all of that, okay? And, of course, he's leaked classified strike information to the world on unclassified networks prior to a strike in the Red Sea. At the best, it's a distraction from defending our country, and at worst, it's harmful. You're talking about stifling inspiration when you start removing, pictures of people like Nicole Malachowski, the first female Thunderbird pilot, because you're afraid of women, I guess. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's where we're at with Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about kind of like removing all of these references to females and all of the DEI stuff. So I thought about you, and I read this statistic. I read an article the other day that was saying that, well, first of all, Hegseth is out there saying, well, we've had this increase in recruitment. But it turns out that that's really all happened. The surge happened under the Biden administration. What I thought was really interesting was that in the Army, the increase was actually driven disproportionately by women. So I saw in 2024, female enlistments were up 18%, whereas male enlistments was up 8%. So could it be that the DEI was actually helping with recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, this notion of like, nobody really knows what DEI is. And the definition changes, right? Depending on who you talk to. It's interesting. A lot of people think DEI are quotas. That's never been the case. There's no quotas in the military. It's simply making sure that you have an environment, a culture of inclusivity that, so that you can get the best, most talented people and inspire the best, most talented people, and not all the same dudes who look like, sound like, and act like Pete Hegseth. That's what DEI is. Okay. So to respond though to your comment on the recruiting, I think it's really important what you just brought up, which is recruiting numbers have been going up at the same rate for over a year, almost a year and a half now. So all of that happened way prior to Donald Trump becoming the president. And people need to know that recruiting, it's not like these 17 and 18-year-olds sit around and say, I really like the president, so I'm going to, and I really like Secretary Hegseth, so I'm gonna enlist now. I mean, that's bullshit, guys. Recruiting is a function of the economy. Okay. It's also a function of outreach. And as you mentioned, we had the statistics, the data, actual facts show that women have been largely the reason for the uptick in recruiting over the past year. And that is because of initiatives. You call it DEI, I call it recruiting. The right people going out there and getting people of talent. The fact of the matter is only about 20 to 25% of the American youth qualify for our military. So we need the best talent, most talented people to fill those slots. It's not all a bunch of, infantry take the hill type of jobs anymore. Those are important. But we need people who understand AI. We need people who are medics. We need people who can speak different languages. The military is a place where we have to have a broad range of talents in order to defend our country.
But I know, Brian, you were interested in the March on Washington.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the on the March in Washington on D-Day to celebrate the 81st anniversary of that. But I also wanted just to kind of continue the passion a little bit. Wanted to get your insight on the military parade that's being planned for June 14th, which on the good side is to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Army. But of course, on the maybe more negative side, it's, Trump is saying it's in celebration of his birthday and it's the military parade. It's like a celebration of dear leader, and kind of get a little bit of your take on that as well.
Well, the peaceful protests are always important. And when people think, what can I do right now? Because things are really bleak and there's a lot happening. That is something you can do. You can go out and you can peacefully protest. There's going to be a veterans protest, large, as you mentioned, Brian, on the 6th of June. I plan on being in D.C. for that. There's actually a women's veterans one the day prior. I can't attend that one because I have to do an event in Boone County actually on the 5th. But wherever, you don't have to go to D.C. to do it. There's protests all around, pretty much every major city, and that's the best way that we can communicate in this country right now. And right. I believe it does matter. I was talking to a friend of the family's, my mother, who's in her mid-80s, has a friends that she's been friends with for 50 years, a couple, same age as she is. And she did a Zoom with them, I don't know, a couple of months ago. And they live in Arizona, and the man's name is Rich. And I happened to be visiting my mom that night. And so I said hi over the Zoom, and we talked about the state of the nation. And Rich, who's, 86 years old, 85, 86 years old, said to me, Amy, I'm 85. I have never protested anything in my life in this country. I lived through Vietnam. I lived through all kinds of stuff. I've never gone to a protest. I'm going out to protest tomorrow.
Hey man, that's great.
And he looked me in the eye and I said, thank you, because that's what we need.
It speaks to the seriousness of the moment. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah. But on the military parade, we all want to celebrate the birthday of the Army. Okay. In the Marine Corps, we celebrate the birthday of the Marine Corps usually with booze and with a cake cutting ceremony and a big ball. Okay. Right. Military parades are just not something that we have done in our nation's capital often. We have done them. We did them at the end of World War II, some victory parades and that kind of thing. It's just not something that we typically do in the modern era, especially with things like tanks. There's an optics there that it's very much, it looks a lot like, North Korea or China, Tiananmen Square. That's kind of what I'm worried about. Somebody running in front of a tank. What kind of optics does that send? It's just not who we are. We are a nation. We celebrate our military. We respect our military, but we are not a militarized nation. That's one of the things I love about this country. If you look on the dollar bill, you look on the back of the dollar bill and you see the eagle on the back of the dollar bill. It's got in one claw, it's got an olive branch. In the other claw, it's got arrows. And those are symbolic, right? The olive branch symbolizes peace, harmony. The arrows symbolize war and militarism. So we got both. Let's be real. We got the best military in the world. But which way is that eagle looking? The eagle is always looking toward the olive branch. And I feel like we need to remember that. And that is the reason we don't have military parades. And that's the reason we don't need them. We don't need them. It's just not, it's not a good tradition to get on, to continue or to even start.
And when it comes to Trump, I never can quite understand why he's kind of Teflon when it comes to the military. I saw his commencement speech wearing the MAGA hat the other day, his horrifically disrespectful tweet about Memorial Day that was just put out. These to me as a civilian, I'm like, why this is so disrespectful. And I don't understand why it doesn't get more noticeability, right? Why is there not more awareness that this guy is like he disrespects the military from the day that he talked about John McCain 8 years ago, and he's just never stopped.
He doesn't understand the military. He is, he doesn't understand the values of sacrifice. He doesn't understand doing something for a cause greater than self. And that to him is very threatening. And I think that's the reason why I the wearing the MAGA hat at the West Point graduation is just a big middle finger. It's just a slap in the face to everybody who's ever been a professional soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, whatever. We those of us that serve this country, we take an oath to the Constitution. We do not serve one man. We do not. Our loyalty is not to the president. It's to the country and to the Constitution. That has always irked Trump. And when you wear a partisan hat and then take away all the crap that he said,
oh my gosh,
which his speech was terribly heinous and totally disrespectful in of itself. But when you wear a hat like that, you're disrespecting the service in the military and in the nonpartisan nature of our military. And the other thing about it is he doesn't have anyone around him, Natalie, who can tell him, "Hey, sir, take the hat off. Well,
Yeah,
welcome to West
right.
Point. Just take the hat off." He doesn't have a Mattis. He doesn't have a Kelly. He doesn't have a McMaster. He's purged everyone. So the only people around him now are the yes men. And that's what we're seeing. And unfortunately, the military hasn't been put in this position quite the same like this before. General Milley was put in this position when Trump used him as a backdrop for the Black Lives Matter, Bible thing that he did. General Milley knew that was wrong. He didn't process it until later. And then he apologized for it and said it was wrong. And he's, the current members of the military, the higher ranking, are all sort of thinking about this. They're seeing the firings right now. And they're knowing that they know that if they don't go along with this, they're going to get fired. That's why the superintendent of West Point in uniform walked right alongside Donald Trump with his big hat on. I think it's shameful.
Yeah, and one final note on that West Point, I heard he didn't stick around to shake hands with all of the graduates, which is a tradition.
Yeah, I mean, everybody likes to criticize the former President Biden for not having stamina or whatever. Yeah, he shook 1,000 hands every time he went to a service academy.
But we are starting to run out of time, and instead of ending on a very negative note, Amy, we do like to do a little fun lightning round with our guests, where we have 5 quick questions we like to ask our guests just to get to know you a little better if you're up for that.
You got it. Send it.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So let's say you had to go back into active duty service, but you could not be commissioned as an officer in the Marines. Which branch would you go into?
I mean, I'd have to go Navy.
Yeah.
I went to Naval Academy.
Naval Academy, right?
30% of the graduates go Marine Corps from the Naval Academy. The other 70% go into the Navy. So I chose the Marine Corps, but if that wasn't available, I'd have to bleed blue.
All right. So second question. This is maybe a 2-parter. So I know you've been all over the world. Which country was your favorite, and where did you feel the least safe?
I really love Japan. my time there. I was stationed in Iwakuni. I love the people. I love the culture. It was a really fun tour that I learned a lot. So I like Japan, and I'd love to go back there. And then as far as fearful, I mean, I think my combat tours were all had a little bit of a lace of fear, Afghanistan and Iraq. So I probably Afghanistan, maybe the second tour even, where I felt like, because I wasn't flying as much on that tour, I was on the ground, so a little more, I don't want to say vulnerable. I did a lot of planning. I was mostly behind the wire or whatever, but it just I wasn't used to it as much as flying. I feel like when I'm flying, I'm King Kong, so
you have control, right? You have control. All right, so this is an either or question, and I'm sorry that you have to pick one, okay? Would you rather endure a Trump rally or a Pete Hegseth security briefing?
Oh, they're
you
both
have to
bad.
pick one.
I feel like I could endure a Trump rally only because there's not something serious on the line. I worry that like every time, there's some kind of briefing or something serious going on, if Hegseth is involved, that, we're not well served. So I feel like a Trump rally is kind of just annoying.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
That's fair. All right, this one's easy. Skyline, Gold Star, or other?
Skyline.
All right. All right. And last question for you. In light of your Truth in the Barrel podcast, what is your go-to bourbon of choice right now?
I don't have a favorite bourbon. It kind of ebbs and flows. The one that I have right now in front of me, which I'm going to highlight in my next Truth in the Barrel, is Horse Soldier. It's out of Somerset.
I've seen that.
Started by a bunch of special forces guys. But I like lots of different bourbons. I really love Green River. That's out of Owensboro. I love the taste of that. But I also love other stuff besides Kentucky bourbon. I love what I'm drinking right now is it's called Black Whiskey. It's from Peru, actually. So
Ooh.
I know I'm kind of a connoisseur now.
Well, Amy, we sure appreciate you joining the pod, and we really especially appreciate your service to our country by you and your fellow veterans, of course. We also recognize you're continuing your service to America through your campaigns for public office, political fundraising, your PACs, other policy influence initiatives, and your leadership development for women, which I think is great. It's really been an honor to spend time with you. Thanks again.
Well, thanks for what you do. That's so important for Northern Kentucky and for Kentucky in general. You're speaking the truth out there, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. As always, we like to close our podcast with not only a call to action, but we'd like to let you know of all the great events that we have coming up. First off, though, our neighbors down in Laurel, Pulaski, and Russell counties could really use some help recovering from the deadly tornadoes they just experienced. So, hey, listeners, if you can, please donate to the Team Kentucky Storm Relief Fund. Every dollar helps provide emergency shelter, food, and rebuilding resources. Just search Kentucky Storm Relief Fund to navigate to the donation website.
Yeah, indeed. Those donations are so important. So yeah, definitely check that out. And if you're looking for other ways to get involved in the party, we have a lot of Northern Kentucky Democratic events coming up. So the first one is going to be on June 1st at the Northern Kentucky Pride Festival and Parade. We're going to be there from 12 until 5 in Goebel Park in Covington. And you can sign up to walk in the parade with the Kenton County Democrats, or stop by our vendor booth to pick up some swag. And the Blue Dot podcast will also be there live. We're going to do some interviews about why Pride is important, among other things. So definitely come by and check us out. And then on June 7th, the Growing the Blue Dot Training NKY will take place at the Campbell County Public Library at 9:30. And then on June 13th, we have the KDP Forward Kentucky Dinner, and that's going to be in Owensboro with special guests Andy Beshear and our Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman and the DNC Chair Ken Martin. And you can also visit the Kenton County Democrats events page on our website, kentoncountydemocrats.org, for details on all of our upcoming events. And you can also RSVP to all of the events right there on that website. And Brian, what do you have on your calendar?
Okay, so first off, as we discussed with Amy in our interview earlier, is the Unite for Veterans, Unite for America rally, which is scheduled, as she mentioned, for June 6th, which is the 81st anniversary of D-Day in Washington, D.C., and that is going to be a huge event. But there will also be rallies affiliated with Unite for Veterans, as well as some other veteran-focused and D-Day focused events in other cities across the country. I was out checking on mobilize.us, and it's a great website, as we've mentioned before, and they have a lot of those events listed there, so you can see what might be near you, you might be interested in attending. And then on June 14th is going to be another very large protest rally day sponsored by Indivisible and 5051 and a bunch of other organizations. It's officially known as No Kings Day and is being organized to coincide with Flag Day, but also it happens to be the same day as the tentatively scheduled, or I guess proposed, I guess it's definite now, military parade in Washington, D.C. that we also mentioned previously. Check out the 5051 website, which is 5050 spelled out .one or www.nokings.org, that has a map and a list of all of the more than 1,000 protests that are currently scheduled. In Cincinnati, the rally is going to run from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and it's going to be at University Pavilion up by UC, and is going to include a march on Clifton Avenue. So if you've never been to one, June 14th could be a really good day to join in and see what it's all about. It should be pretty exciting, pretty inspiring to lots of people.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. So I'm looking forward to that one. That is it for this week. Thank you all for joining the Blue Dot Podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks to bring you up to speed with all things political in Kenton County and beyond. And don't forget, you can join the conversation at our Facebook and Instagram pages or at bluedotpodcast.com. And if you like listening to our podcast, you can consider donating to help us fund the podcast. And you can do that by clicking on the donate link at bluedotpodcast.com. So until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, and never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everybody.